We're talking about a really strange situation that's occurring at the moment. This idea that offence seems to be, and look, it's sort of returning to a conversation that we've had about free speech before, but I really feel that we're heading in a very, very strange direction at the moment when it comes to the transgender debate, when it comes to the freedom of speech around religion debate, when it comes to the racism debate. And I feel like we've stopped listening to each other. I feel like we want to cancel each other more than we want to listen to each other. I feel like we want to whine and whinge about free speech, but only on subjects that we feel comfortable about. And if they are in any way challenging our echo chamber, we want to cancel that other person. Have we lost the art of nuanced debate? Have we lost the ability to listen to each other? Or are we now in a minefield where it comes to offending each other? What are the rules when it comes to these things? I've just given you a couple of examples at the start of the show that I'm particularly passionate about at the moment. And that is the main two being, of course, because we've spoken about Harry and Meghan many times, but what's happening in Batley and what's happening within the gay community at the moment. But of course, you may have your own examples. In fact, I got a really good tweet here from someone saying, where is it? Here. Spot on, Cristo, says Redman. As a white, 40-year-old Christian straight bloke, in any conversation with the public, I subconsciously think, who am I going to offend? It shouldn't be like this. Free speech, no more. Well, as long as you're well-mannered, and as long as you have good intentions, what's the problem? And Winston saying, you've just cancelled some of your audience. Food for thought. Not cancelled them at all. They have absolutely every right to watch along. They have every single right to contribute if they wish to. But if they're going to try and make a point about free speech whilst ironically trying to limit my free speech, well then perhaps they're not bright enough to be joining in with this debate, and that's the point I'm making. Let's now talk live to the Campaign for Common Sense. It's a campaign that aims to champion free speech and campaign against the intolerance of hard-line activism, I should say. Mark Lehain from that organisation joins me live via video link. Evening to you, Mark.
Evening, Cristo.
I'm getting more and more depressed about all of this. This idea that we are constantly almost not listening to each other, almost losing any kind of nuance in debate. You can agree with some of someone's opinion, but not all of it. You can come from a good place but disagree with people. I mean, do you agree with the examples, I don't know if you were listening before, that I've given tonight, that we are heading in quite a dangerous direction? Or is this sort of all just manufactured angst? Is it not as serious as perhaps I'm portraying it?
I think the examples you've given this evening are really, really good ones. As you said, what's going on in Batley has got a lot of people worried for very, very good reasons. But actually, and maybe it's because I'm generally an optimist by nature, I think that we are in a difficult situation right now. It's one of the reasons why I helped set up the Campaign for Common Sense. But I do think the tide is starting to turn, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of us, we've got a lot more in common with everyone else than some of the activists would have us believe. And also people want to get on with their neighbours, with their workmates, with their classmates, with people in their community. They don't want to be divided by other people. They don't want to be pigeonholed according to the colour of their skin or the kind of people that they fall in love with or find attractive. So I think where we are getting these really tricky situations popping up, I think we do have to take them seriously. I think we do have to deal with them sensitively, but I take it as a sign that people are wanting to put common sense and fair play back at the centre of public life and debate.
I also think that the rules tend to change. What was not seen as homophobic or transphobic a year ago may now be seen as transphobic today. For me to say, oh God, well, you know what, I'm not really particularly turned on by vaginas, and sorry to say that word so many times. I don't know why I'm apologising to my female staff tonight about that word, but, you know, that used to be an acceptable thing for a gay person to say. You can't really say it that much anymore without some people accusing you of being in some way offensive towards the trans community. You used to be able to make to refer to people in certain ways with certain ethnicities. BAME used to be something that we were encouraged to say. Those rules then changed this very week, and if you don't catch up, if you're not up to date with every single bit of terminology and every single way in which someone needs to be addressed, someone's pronouns, someone's the way in which their ethnicity should be addressed, you are told that you're being offensive when you might have just made a genuine error.
And listen, things do change over time. And actually, an awful lot of good things have happened in recent decades and over the years as we have embraced more differences between people within our society. So let's not pretend that in many regards, things haven't got better. Where it starts to fall down is when small groups of very influential activists start to tell us not just sort of how we might interact with one another, but what we should say and what we should think. And that just doesn't work. And in the end, it turns in on itself. And what you end up with all of these radical political movements over the year is what was politically correct or woke one moment is reactionary the next. So lots of us thought we were pretty up to date with things when we started referring to like LGB things. And then the next thing you know, it's LGBT. And then the next thing you know, it's LGBTQIA plus. Indeed, even the BBC can't keep up with its own protocols about how it should be referring to things. And the other area where it falls down is we start putting people into communities. They don't get to define themselves which communities they're in. Other people start referring to the gay community, the trans community, this community group, that community group. And actually it forgets that any group is made up of individuals. And the most important thing is that we as individuals get to decide as far as possible and to the point that it doesn't hurt other people literally in their own lives. We get to choose what we believe, what we say, and what we do. And again, we've seen this going on in Batley in the last week. Now, I'm particularly interested in that. I was a teacher and a head teacher for 15 years. So I know from my own experience that on the one hand, whilst I would defend to the death people's rights to believe what they think and say what they want to, because we live in a free society, and that's the way we protect other people's freedoms, I also know that when you run a school is not really a place, because it's full of children, particularly younger children, it's not really a place for free speech and debating everything to the nth degree. And we don't want children who have to go to school to be put in situations where they might feel really uncomfortable with what's going on in a lesson. Now, listen, I was brought up a really traditional Catholic, Latin masses, all that kind of stuff. I'm an atheist now, but I understand how important people's faith is to them if that's what they choose to believe in. However, that doesn't give people who have a strong faith the right to tell everyone else who shares a different belief or a different set of values how to lead their lives. And the only way we're all going to get on is if we hold on to our own beliefs strongly, but grant everyone else the right to live their lives as they see fit.
Yeah, as long as, and I keep you returning to this word, as long as the intent is good. Like I said, if you are someone who is addressing someone else and you get some terminology wrong, maybe it will be someone's racial background. Well, then fine. I don't think we should tolerate racists, but if you are someone who gets the way that they should be addressed wrong and your intent is good, absolutely. We should try and educate that person and move on rather than try and cancel them. And I think that it's not only nuance we've lost, I think we've lost a little bit of the common sense around people's intent. If you were to refer, certainly if you're looking at the LGBTQIA community, and you're right, the number of letters changes all the time. If you misgender Sam Smith, for instance, and you happen to forget and refer to him as he rather than they, that may well be an honest mistake. Whereas nowadays, you would be hounded if you did that, because just making a mistake doesn't seem to be allowed nowadays. So that returns us, as you mentioned, to Batley, because the way I see the Batley story, this teacher had the intent not to offend people in the class, not to offend students. I mean, we've got this absurd situation now where he's not sure he'll ever be able to return to his job. They're talking about an exclusion zone around the school when people seem to have forgotten his intent. Was he right or wrong to show that cartoon in that lesson?
Well, actually, I'm going to be really clear about this, having been a head teacher myself. I'm not going to comment on the rights or wrongs of what may have gone on in that classroom, because neither you or I know exactly what happened in that classroom, what the context of the lesson was, and like you said, what the intention of that teacher was. What I can do is talk about it more generally. Now, listen, generally, in the adult world, if you like, in public life, we absolutely have the freedom to say what we want, draw the pictures we want to do, and believe what we want to do. Other people have the right to not listen to us or to not look at whatever pictures we may put out there. And people of faith have no right to stop people of different faith or no faith from drawing pictures that they may wish to, or looking at stuff they may want to. When we go into schools, because we're dealing with children who have to go to school, it is a different kind of place. And so we do have to have a different set of rules and guidelines about how people go on. But because we don't know what went on in that particular school, I don't want to comment
about that. But he has clarified since. He said it was a lesson about free speech and a lesson about blasphemy. And so isn't that enough for you to think that, well, actually then there's context? He wasn't saying, hey, look, kids, have you seen this? Oh, this is what Islam is all about. It was in the context of free speech and offence being and the way in which offence can be perceived when it comes to these things. So why isn't that enough for you to say, well, actually, in that context, then it probably is okay?
Okay, well, if we take what you've told me as what happened, then I suppose putting my teacher hat on, there's two things I'd want to think about. One is, do we need to do something that we know may dramatically offend a group of people in that class in order to get the teaching across? Do you need to show blasphemy, or, if you like, commit blasphemy in order to teach kids about it? And I know some very good RE teachers, and I've spoken to them about this, and their view is, and I tend to go with them, you don't need to put children in that situation in order for them to learn about blasphemy. You know, we wouldn't insist that kids who followed a vegan lifestyle had to eat meat in order to comment on the morality of eating meat, okay? So I think we do have to bear in mind, when you're dealing with young people, they do belong to their families as well as the wider community in schools, and we need to bear that in mind. But that does not take away from the fact that the way a small number of individuals have used this as an excuse to push to make threats towards that teacher and towards that school, that is completely out of order. It's taken far too long for the teaching unions to come out and publicly back the teacher in terms of what they were doing. And we absolutely have to support the right of individuals outside of schools in particular, in society more generally, to do whatever they think they should do, even if it causes offence. And I might slightly disagree with you there. No one has the right to feel offended. You might not like what people are doing, you might not like what they're saying, but it's their right to say it, and you have the right to walk away. We're grown-ups. Indeed, the only way to protect religious freedom and freedom of belief, indeed the only way to protect a free society, is by granting people the right to say and do as they wish, even if it causes you offence. And I think we've got to be grown up enough to accept that.
Well, but then that would imply that it would be okay to then show those pupils that picture of Muhammad, the cartoon of Muhammad. Why can't you demonstrate blasphemy with an example of blasphemy? I mean, if I was going to teach blasphemy, I mean, I even hate the term blasphemy, but if I was going to teach the concept of that, I might show that picture of the cartoon of Muhammad. I might show a clip of Life of Brian. I might show a clip of The Producers, written by Mel Gibson. What am I talking about? Mel Brooks. There might be, 3 or 4 different examples of different faiths and what would be considered blasphemy within those faiths. You then, as a class, have a discussion about, is that acceptable? Is it okay? Is it not? And then that's how you not only learn blasphemy, but more importantly, you learn discussion, you learn tolerance for another opinion, you learn to listen, you learn to put your opinion across, and then hopefully you all leave that lesson a little bit more enlightened, not only of your own view, but of other people's views. If you don't show that, but you did show those other religions, blasphemy in those other religions, would that be fair? Would that be the right way to educate?
Absolutely not. Now, you've made a really, really important point here. And again, context is key to this. So you talked about the importance of us trying to hold on to nuance when we're having these debates. And like I said, I have no problem at all in the adult world, in the real world out there, people being able to say and do exactly as they wish. And if people don't like it, they can walk away and ignore them. All I'm trying to say is, when you're dealing in schools where children have to go, where children are put there and their parents trust the schools that they're going to do right by them, what we shouldn't be doing is trying to put a barrier between the values that children have been brought up with by their parents and what the school is pushing onto them. Children can make their own mind up as they get older. So there's a big difference between what you might do with a class of 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds and what you might do with sixth formers, young people that are 17 or 18. And of course, once you get to university, they're all adults. And I would argue you should be able to expose those adults to all the things that they want to be exposed to or that they choose to be exposed
So
to.
if these
We shouldn't
pupils,
make a difference between different places.
so if these pupils were 16, say, or 18 even, and it was a religious studies A level, do you think for 1 second, because I don't, those people who are protesting outside of the school would say, oh, well, actually, look, no, these kids are 18 years of age. No, that's going to be fine then. It's only because they're children. It's not because they're children that they're protesting. They're protesting because they want, essentially, a blasphemy law in this country, meaning that people can't view or show these sorts of cartoons. And that is not the society we should be living in.
No, we absolutely should not. But again, let's not allow a small number of people with relatively extreme views that are only held by a minority of people. Let's not confuse them for the bulk of where the population is. Lots of the people that are protesting outside their school would have had very strongly held beliefs or views about what shouldn't or shouldn't go on. However, that doesn't mean that more broadly, we shouldn't be able to go on and show whatever pictures or images we want to when we're discussing certain topics. I would argue that you probably don't achieve a lot more in a lesson about blasphemy by showing children material that they might consider to be blasphemous. I don't think you get a lot more out of it, particularly when they're younger. If children or young people in sixth form wanted to engage with that, absolutely, that's the way to go about it. And, you're talking to somebody like I said.
And then what would be the best way? So say that is shown for whatever reason, and the intent is good, but it is not acceptable. What is then the way in which that should be dealt with? Because what is happening now, what was happening 18 months ago as well, let's not forget as well the Birmingham protests where children were simply being told about the existence of different kinds of relationships. It wasn't in a prurient way, it wasn't in a way in which to encourage them into that sorts of relationships. There was no sexual element to the way in which they were being told, but still parents protested to the point where that school also required an exclusion zone. What does a parent do in that situation?
Well, do you know what? So let's deal with the protest issue. There should not be people protesting outside schools for an extended period of time, making people feel unsafe. That's just not acceptable. Just as it is completely unacceptable for people to be making threats against people running schools or like this teacher in Batley for what they've done. That is completely out of order. What we have to deal with, though, when we are looking at schools, particularly when we're dealing with younger children, primary school age children and children in the early years of secondary school, we do have to recognise that there is this natural tension between the values that families bring their children up with and values which wider society might have. And in lots of cases, there will be a tension between those two sets of values. And there is no one-size-fits-all answer about what we do when we're dealing with those situations. What we do have to try and do in those situations then is, rather than people causing a fuss, causing protests outside of school, spreading rumours through the local community, what we ideally do is leave it to the teachers in that school and the parents of the children that it's concerned about to sort it out amongst themselves. What isn't helped is activists, professional or otherwise, wading in, spreading rumours and pushing their plans and their ideas onto that particular set of kids in that particular school. It doesn't help anybody at all, and it just divides us further and makes things even worse.
I have to say I disagree, though. I disagree. I think that a child should be able to be shown those things in the context of education. Isn't it the job of schools to actually show a different point of view than the children might get at home?
Absolutely.
Isn't that the precise job? And if at home they are told that something is blasphemous and wrong, and then they get to school, they're offered an alternative point of view, that's precisely what school is there for.
That is one of the important roles that schools fulfil within our society.
Well, then they should have been shown the cartoon then.
My point is, there's lots of different ways that we can help young people grow up to make up their own mind.
Well, then how can they not make up their own mind, though, if they're not shown the cartoon? Because you've also just said that you don't think they should have been shown the cartoon.
I can only speak from my own personal perspective. I could not have grown up in a more traditional religious Catholic household. And I sit in front of you today, an atheist, who's made his own way through life because my mum and dad brought me up the way that they thought was best. And then as I grew older, I made my own opinions about things. as I grow older from my friends. School is not the be all and end all. School is not the only way that young people are going to learn about life. I'm sure it wasn't the only way that you learned stuff as you were getting older. So hence what we have to try and do in that limited time that schools have got is to teach kids the academic subjects, and then where we're coming across, the moral issues, the philosophical, the social issues, we try and present kids as neutral a set of values and as neutral a set of issues as possible so they can form their own opinion. I wouldn't want kids having a particular view on religion forced on them any more than I would want them to have a particular set of political views forced on them, the way that left-wing activists are trying to do around stuff around environmentalism or around some of the anti-racism stuff that's being pushed onto children these days, or some of the environment, the Extinction Rebellion lot. I wouldn't want any of that pushed onto children in school any more than I would want them to be told that a particular set of pictures or images were that you could never see them. It's just whether the right place to deal with it is in that school in that way. And I think that is a bit more nuanced.
All right, Mark Lehain, Campaign for Common Sense. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us tonight here on Talk Radio. Do you agree with Mark that maybe those sorts of lessons, that sort of lesson on blasphemy, could have been carried out? This is still rumbling on this story. Last night, some of you said, why aren't you talking about this story some more?